Hey there movie lovers, welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're stepping into the world of 007 with a very different kind of Bond film, the 1983 comeback Never Say Never Again. Featuring the return of Sean Connery to the role that made him a legend, this unofficial Bond outing is packed with exotic locations, larger-than-life villains, and a fascinating backstory that sets it apart from the rest of the franchise. But how much do you really know about this controversial chapter in Bond history? So put on your diving gear and join us as we explore 20 things you never knew about Never Say Never Again. Although Never Say Never Again was not released until 1983, the same year Eon issued its 13th entry in the James Bond series Octopussy, the film's origins stretch back 24 years. In 1959, Kevin McClory and screenwriter Jack Whittingham collaborated with Ian Fleming on a series of theatrical treatments and scripts. These later evolved into the basis for Thunderball, which was initially intended to become the first official 007 film in 1960. However, concerns arose over McClory serving as producer, and in 1961, Fleming published Thunderball as a novel, heavily drawing on Whittingham's script without acknowledgement. Angered by this, McClory and Whittingham pursued legal action against Fleming over the plagiarism. Meanwhile, keen to proceed with their own agreement, Broccoli and Saltzman set Thunderball aside and moved ahead with Dr. No. In December 1963, McClory and Fleming reached an out-of-court settlement. McClory was granted the film rights to Thunderball, including the use of Blofeld and Spectre. Lacking sufficient financial backing, he later sought support from Eon, leading to Thunderball finally reaching cinemas in 1965. Under the terms of the agreement, Eon was permitted to continue using Blofeld and Spectre for the following 10 years. In 1976, McClory and Sean Connery began developing a script for a new 007 adventure, variously titled Warhead, Warhead 8, or James Bond of the Secret Service, and based on Thunderball. However, United Artists initiated legal action, and with McClory lacking the financial resources for another prolonged court battle, the project was shelved for the time being. Then, in the early 1980s, McClory met producer Jack Schwartzman, and together they revived the Warhead project. With financial backing from Warner Brothers, they successfully won a court ruling that granted McClory the right to produce his own 007 film, provided it was essentially a remake of Thunderball. Lorenzo Semple Jr. was then engaged to write a new screenplay. Irvin Kershner is of course best known for directing the 1980 Star Wars sequel, The Empire Strikes Back. However, his appointment came about because Sean Connery, who held numerous approvals over different aspects of the production, had previously enjoyed working with Kershner on the 1966 film A Fine Madness. Their strong professional relationship proved invaluable, as it enabled them, alongside assistant director David Tomblin, to take on several of the producers' responsibilities. The title, Never Say Never Again, has its origins in a famously ironic remark made by Sean Connery himself. After completing Diamonds Are Forever in 1971, Connery was repeatedly asked whether he would ever return to the role of James Bond, a character he felt he had definitively left behind. Frustrated by the question and keen to move on from the franchise, he bluntly replied, "Never again," a statement that quickly became part of Bond folklore. More than a decade later, when Connery agreed to reprise the role for the 1983 non-Eon production, the filmmakers embraced the actor's earlier declaration, turning it into a knowing, self-referential title that playfully acknowledged both Connery's long absence from the series and his unexpected return to the role that had made him an international icon. McClory initially intended the film to open with a variation of the iconic gun barrel sequence used in the official Bond series, but this idea was ultimately abandoned in favour of an opening featuring a screen filled with 007 symbols, which also meant there was no opening sequence in the film, although one was filmed but not used. The original Thunderball was renowned for its extensive underwater sequences, which highlighted just how far ahead of its time the film was. By contrast, and perhaps in recognition that it could not truly rival its predecessor, Never Say Never Again devoted far less screen time to underwater action. As a result, these sequences were less memorable, which is notable given that much of the central plot and several key action moments still unfold beneath the surface. Despite this, the production did enlist Thunderball's underwater director, second unit director and stunt coordinator, Riku Browning, to fulfill the same roles on this film. Rowan Atkinson made his film debut in this production. He portrayed the bumbling British agent Nigel Small-Fawcett, a role that preceded his later fame in the Mr. Bean comedy series. He would also go on to parody James Bond himself in the Johnny English films. Connery was willing to turn the film's ending into an in-joke by having Roger Moore's Bond pass him in the street and cheerfully remark that one should never say never again. However, the idea of the two Bonds meeting on screen was rejected, resulting instead in the existing ending. To facilitate the filming of this conclusion, and likely to avoid escalating production costs, Connery allowed the scene to be shot at his then home on the French Riviera. Kim Basinger reportedly did not get along with Irving Kershner, and later said that it had been the worst experience she had endured on a film up to that point. A view she said was only surpassed by her work on The Marrying Man. According to Kershner, she was a problem on set. An example being that her then husband, Ron Snyder, was also her makeup artist, and he was secretly signalling her to get a reshoot if he didn't approve of how she looked. When Kershner found out, he had him banned from the set. Meanwhile, Sean Connery and producer Jack Schwartzman were said to have barely spoken during the production, with Connery reportedly unimpressed by what he perceived as a lack of professionalism behind the scenes, and later described the entire operation as a bloody Mickey Mouse affair. Irving Kershner shared Connery's assessment, later commenting that Schwartzman did not have the experience required of a film producer. Steven Seagal, who served as the film's martial arts instructor, accidentally broke Sean Connery's wrist during training. Connery later revealed on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno that he did not realize the injury had occurred until more than a decade afterwards. According to Barbara Carrera, her involvement came at the expense of a potentially high-profile role in the rival Bond production Octopussy. Carrera revealed that she was offered the chance to play the film's title character, but chose to turn it down, driven by a strong desire to work alongside Sean Connery, whom she regarded as the definitive and original James Bond. The film received a Golden Globe nomination for Carrera, who was recognized for her supporting performance as Blush. However, she ultimately lost the award to Cher for Silkwood. To date, Carrera remains the only actress to have been nominated at the Golden Globes for portraying a Bond girl, with no actress ever having received an Oscar nomination for playing one. Aside from Sean Connery, only one other actor was involved in both Thunderball and Never Say Never Again. Robert Rietti provided the voice of Emilio Largo in Thunderball, and later appeared as the Italian minister in Never Say Never Again. In addition, 5 individuals worked on the technical aspects of both productions: Michael White, Lionel Strutt, George Leach, Riku Browning, and Jordan Klein Sr. Bond and Leiter board a submarine that not only devastates the Palmyra fortress with its deck gun, but also carries missile-propelled jetpacks, enabling Bond and his CIA ally to reach Largo's underground cavern. While special effects were employed to depict the submarine's attack on Palmyra, the remaining footage of the vessel in operation was actually taken from John Sturgis's 1968 adaptation of Alistair MacLean's novel Ice Station Zebra. Moore had originally planned to step down from the role of Bond after For Your Eyes Only, prompting the franchise's producers to begin searching for a replacement. Timothy Dalton was screen tested, as was American actor James Brolin. However, once news emerged that Connery was returning in Never Say Never Again, Eon moved to retain Moore, believing that an established and still popular Bond would stand a better chance against Connery than an untested newcomer. Originally, both films and Octopussy were scheduled for simultaneous theatrical release, sparking a brief surge of media attention over what became known as the Battle of the Bonds. In the end, the decision was taken to stagger the release dates. Ultimately, the official series emerged as the victor, with Octopussy outperforming Never Say Never Again at the 1983 box office. The closing credits of the film include a brief acknowledgement to AK. This was a discreet nod to the assistance of Saudi billionaire Adnan Khashoggi. Khashoggi owned Largo's ship, the Flying Saucer, also known as Disco Volante, and allowed the production to film on board. At the time, the super yacht was called Nabila, though Khashoggi later sold it to the Sultan of Brunei in 1988. It was subsequently acquired by Donald Trump, who refitted the vessel and renamed it Trump Princess, before selling it on to another Saudi businessman. The sound effects used for the nuclear missiles in flight, most notably as they pass over a beach and out to sea, were later recycled 6 years afterwards for Tim Burton's Batman. In that film, the same effects were repurposed to represent the distinctive whine of the Batwing's engines. Several key members of the crew from the 1981 hit Raiders of the Lost Ark were involved in the production. These included First Assistant Director David Tomblin, cinematographer Douglas Slocum, Second Unit Director Mickey Moore, and production designers Philip Harrison and Stephen Grimes. Their influence is perhaps most evident in the North African sequences, particularly at Largo's Palmyra fortress and the richly detailed cavern housing the Tears of Allah, which was constructed at Elstree Studios near London. Also, the large man whom Sean Connery fights in the Health Spa was portrayed by wrestler Pat Roach, the same actor who played the bold German mechanic defeated by Harrison Ford around the flying wing aircraft in Raiders. Never Say Never Again was originally released by Warner Brothers due to Kevin McClory's separate ownership of the Thunderball rights, which kept it outside the official Bond series. But in 1997, however, MGM acquired the film as part of a wider rights settlement, allowing it to be distributed alongside the Eon-produced Bond films, and bringing Connery's unofficial Bond back into the same studio library. But many continue to regard it as a standalone spin-off rather than a true part of the Bond canon. Coincidentally, this deal also allowed the company to reintroduce Blofeld to the Eon series. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about Never Say Never Again. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.